In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, one God.
Amen.
Now, once in a while, meaning about every day, I hear comments about the length of my sermons. So I decided, all right, I'm going to give everyone an option Sunday. I'm going to let you choose. Do you want the shorter sermon or the longer sermon? All right. Well, it's kind of mixed, so we're going to have to break the tie. Raise your hand if you have enough faith to walk on water. All right, I guess the longer sermon wins. So I'm joking about this, but there really is a lot we need to talk about because every single one of us wants to have more faith. I would be shocked for someone to say, no, Father, I've got enough, I'm good. We struggle. We want it so badly, and yet we keep coming up short. And I think, what is the reason for that? And it comes back, first of all, to food. All of us have our likes and our dislikes. But our likes and our dislikes tend to be very specific. You might like a certain dish of a certain culture, but you don't like a certain spice. One of the spices I hear about is cumin. For some people, as soon as they hear, there's cumin in it, won't eat it. Other people, I love cumin, bring on the cumin. That kind of dislike or like for a spice is a good way for us to understand how we're going to understand and grow in faith. Why? Because faith, like every dish of food, has ingredients. Rarely do you eat anything that is just one thing. Things that are mixed together, prepared, chopped, mixed, baked, fried, whatever it is, but different things come together, and it's no different for our faith. And here's where most of us are at. In fact, I'd say all of us were at. We all say, yes, Father, I want more faith. But when we break it down to the ingredients, what we're going to find is we really don't like the ingredients. Every single one of us dislikes some of the ingredients of faith. Most of us perhaps don't like any of them. And that's the problem. We say we want to grow in faith, we don't like the ingredients, we don't like the steps to get to more faith, and then lo and behold, we don't grow in our faith. So what I want to do today is I want to break down faith into just a few of the major ingredients. Because we have to understand what's in there. We have to decide, I might not like it, but am I going to do it? Am I going to take on and face my dislike in order to have the faith that I want to have? Now, before we even look at the ingredients of faith, we have to understand what faith is. And I've said to you many, many times, I'll just remind you now briefly, faith is trust. Just like belief is trust. You can say, I believe in God. It doesn't mean I believe He exists. It doesn't mean I hold it to be true. It means I put my trust in Him. So if you say, I have faith in God, it means you trust Him. As Jesus tells us, if we trust Him, we're going to do what He tells us to do. And so the evidence is really the fact that we find it hard to trust. I think all of us have trust issues to some degree. Why is it so hard to trust? Well, we've trusted before. We can all look back and go, look, when I trusted then, look what happened. It came back to bite me. So we can all look back on past hurts and say, well, it's hard to trust. We've been hurt. Another reason we find it hard to trust is that we often, way too often, think, well, I know better. Why would I trust someone else and what they want when I know better than them? And so our pride works against us when it comes to faith in God. But unless we're going to confront that lack of energy, that lack of will to trust God more, we're not going to grow in trust/faith. All right, so that's what faith is. It's trust in God. What's in it? Well, I'm going to list 4 ingredients. All of them, by the way, we're going to see were on great display in this morning's gospel. The first one is that faith is always personal. If you left church this morning and somebody said, what was the gospel? And you said, well, Peter was out in the boat with the disciples, storm comes along, Peter walks in the water, he starts to sink, Jesus grabs him. You'd be accurate, that was all in the gospel, but go back and look at it. Take your bulletin home with you, read it again, and you can realize that 90% of today's gospel was not an action. It was nothing that happened. 90% of today's gospel was a conversation. It's a conversation between Jesus and Peter. And so the first ingredient of our faith is that faith is always personal. It's personal. When Jesus was seen out on the water and Peter was thinking about walking to go see him, what did he say? Lord, if it's you, bid me to walk on the water. It was personal. It wasn't general. It wasn't even, in a sense, theological. If it's you, bid me and I'll come out. And let's face it, we all struggle with a personal faith. Not easy, but easier to say, I'm a Christian. I'm an Orthodox Christian. I go to church. We can talk about our activities. We can talk about our affiliations. But to look someone in the eye and say, I believe in Jesus Christ, harder, because it's personal. And yet, if we're going to grow in faith, we have to grow in our personal faith. We heard this very clearly in today's epistle. St. Paul, talking to the Corinthians and to us, said, for no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. He didn't say the theology about Jesus Christ. He didn't say the church of Jesus Christ. Baptism in Jesus Christ. All those are important. All those things are vital. But the precise foundation of faith is our personal trust, which we all as a church hopefully join together in a group personal trust, which is our faith. So the first ingredient is that faith is always personal. That's hard. The second ingredient is also hard. And that is that faith is always to some degree painful. It may not hurt in a cute, sharp way, but it is always a discomfort. In fact, acting by faith is by definition uncomfortable. Why? Because when we're not in discomfort, we don't need faith. One of the examples I bring to people all the time to talk about what faith is if you're hiking out in the countryside, you come across a canyon. There's two ways to cross that canyon, which goes down and looks to be a mile. There's a nice, brand new 4-lane concrete rails, steel undergirding. There's that one. And there's the rickety little suspension bridge, the broken steps in it, and the frayed rope. It doesn't take much trust to walk across the concrete bridge. It's not uncomfortable for most of us. Some of us don't like the edges. Okay, you stay in the middle and you're fine. But to cross that rickety suspension bridge, to feel the moaning and hear the cracking and hear the peeling of the rope, talk about uncomfortable. Faith is when we act in such ways that require us to go beyond our comfort. We call it our comfort zone. You got to step outside your comfort zone if you're going to step out in faith. And when you don't step out outside your comfort zone, we're not stepping out in faith. So another ingredient that always has to be there if we're going to act in faith is some level of pain or discomfort. Peter felt it. Took a step out, took a few more steps out, was walking on water. Imagine this, was walking on water, and after walking on water, he saw the wind and the waves. Easy for us to say, well, what was wrong with him? He was already walking on the water. That wind and those waves caused him discomfort. They caused him fear. And isn't fear one of our primary senses of discomfort? And when he gave into that pain, when he wanted to withdraw to the comfort zone where he was, he began to sink. So faith is always to some degree painful. Now, the good news is that you and I know very well if we want to do anything important, we seek discomfort. If you exercise in any way, shape, or form, if you go to the gym or you go walking or running, you are going towards discomfort. You know you have to have it. Without discomfort, you're not going to exercise. Your heart has to beat faster if it's going to be a healthy effort for you. We know it that. We also know it in our work life, in our businesses, in our investments. If we're not willing to take any kind of pain, we don't grow. And that same willingness to go towards pain and discomfort in our normal earthly life is the same kind of pain and discomfort we need to choose if we're going to choose faith.
Yes.
The third ingredient is a particular perspective. It's a perspective that includes the divine. The divine perspective. And you and I, if we're going to take steps of faith, can't do it just like Peter couldn't do it by staying in the boat. He had to go outside to a different place. He needed a new perspective. And you and I cannot have steps of faith with a perspective that includes the divine. There was no natural earthly reason that Peter could walk on the water, but he did. Because he adopted Jesus' invitation. He said, Lord, if it's you, bid me come. Jesus says, come. No problem, come on out. And he does it. But for no earthly good reason was he able to walk on the water. But there was a heavenly good reason. Because Jesus wanted Peter to understand something that day. He'll learn it later on. But that was that the world as we see it isn't the world as we see it. At least not with these eyes. St. Paul tells us in a different epistle, we walk by faith, not by sight. There's that word again. We have to include a divine, heavenly, otherworldly, supernatural perspective and then act on it. That's one of the requirements, one of the ingredients of faith. And the last one, the last ingredient I'll talk about today, is that faith is always progressive. It grows. The faith that we had yesterday, that was what we needed yesterday, is not enough faith for today, let alone tomorrow or next week. And so often we don't grow in our faith because we had a faith that was sufficient at one time in our lives, and we wonder, well, why isn't it working anymore? Because we grow. It's one of our divine characteristics. We grow, we change, we develop, we become more capable of what? Of living by faith. So if our faith is going to be real, we have to accept that it's going to be progressive. We're going to have more faith as time goes on, not less and not even the same. So 4 ingredients, and I'm only mentioning 4 out of many, but these I think are principal ones. Think about how much you like any of these. The faith is personal, specific to our relationship with Jesus Christ. That it's painful, that it takes us stepping outside of our comfort zones. And why is it painful? Because it requires a divine perspective, one that includes God and His kingdom. And it's progressive, meaning that what we had before isn't enough. Those 4 ingredients, if we say, I don't like them, I'm not going to do them, we can say that. God gives us the freedom to do it, but then we can't expect to grow in faith. You can't bake or make anything without the ingredients required for it. You can substitute once in a while, but the real deal needs the real ingredients. And if we don't accept that we're going to have to face our dislike of any or all of these, then we're going to be where we were today and yesterday before, not having the faith. Because here's the challenge. 2,000 years ago, Jesus said to Peter, come. Come, walk on the water. What's the big deal? And tomorrow, and before we even get to tomorrow, Jesus will say to each one of us, come. Come take the next step. Step in what? To trust that even with horrible diseases in our bodies, that life is okay. That with horrible diseases out in the air and people carrying them and all kinds of all that, it's still okay. Why? Because we have faith. Until we can accept the pain of having faith and all that goes into it, we're not going to have more. But if we can step out and push back against our unwillingness, or at least our lack of desire to face these difficult things, if we can do that, then imagine what God is going to do with us. Imagine the faith that we all want and how it's going to be there because we put it there. There is no earthly good reason to have faith. You can't explain it to anyone. You can try to, and sometimes it's good to. But you can't try to make it make sense, at least as we limit to life as we see it here with these eyes. But there is heavenly good sense in doing everything to push back past our discomfort and our fear and everything else to choose faith. In fact, that's what it means to enter the kingdom. You and I are striving to have faith in a king. And he is a king because he has a kingdom. And all of us are invited. And we've struggled for far too long wondering, why can't we make progress? Well, now hopefully we know a little better why. We know a little better what we need to face up to and push past if we're going to enter into that kingdom. Our faith is in a king who, as he was facing his own earthly death, said, "My kingdom is not of this world." That's the king that we have faith in. But it's not about us and the world that we want to hold on to. It's his kingdom, both in this world and in the next. So may we all seek, and when we seek, we will find the faith that he's offering us. That's the faith that it takes to enter his kingdom, to live in his kingdom, and to spend all of eternity as the joyful citizens of that kingdom. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.